Welcome to No Options with Ty Gipson, the show where life's toughest trials become the foundation for your greatest triumphs. Real stories, raw conversations, and the unwavering belief that you were built to overcome. Now, here's your host, Ty Gipson.
Hey guys, I am so excited today. On the No Options podcast, we're always talking about, overcoming adversity and just having kind of the no options mindset. As you guys know, I talk about all the time, but I've got a guest today, that is an expert in the youth adversity, right? Resilience in youth. And I wanted to talk about with Matt Butterman. Matt, I am so excited to have you here today, and thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Great to be here, Ty. Thank you.
Yeah. Matt, and I love on the back, right there on your background, he talks about nimble youth, right? And adversity is one of these things, guys, and Matt, that you talk about a lot, but none of us can avoid it, even in the youth space, right? I mean, we all dealing with adversity. And a lot of times it's just figuring out how to deal with it, how to work through it, how to manage through that time and those situations. And Matt, so I'm just going to kind of open the floor up for you and kind of talk about a couple things. I mean, one, let's start right here. I'd like to just say, what got you into this space, and what really got your interest and what really got you going into the nimble youth area?
Right. Well, so I've been in media for much of my life, but my second wife now she is a pediatrician, and she had seen a dramatic shift in the makeup of the patients that she was seeing. It used to be a lot of coming in for wellness checkups and you get flu shots and vaccinations, things like that. And the normal things that you go to see a pediatrician for. But over the years, and especially as, maybe in the past 7 or 8 years, she had seen a marked increase in mental health cases. And so much of her time was spent addressing what is now, and experts have certainly characterized it correctly. It's an epidemic. It's a crisis in our youth, mental health wise. And so she is now opening a new practice that expressly deals with behavioral health. And mental health. So that's her focus, kind of by necessity, right?
Sure.
And she wanted to the practice that she was in, was she had 15 minutes to try to deal with these often very complex cases. Mental illness is hard to get to the bottom of a lot of times. It takes a lot of exploration and some trial and error as well. And so 15-minute appointments weren't really doing it. Right. So this model that she's created has allowed for more time with the patients, and they have a team that deals with the family. So my focus came in helping her kind of hone her focus and her expertise in that arena. And I should point out, I'm not a licensed counselor, but I am a layperson on the outside, and I'm seeing that the crisis is real. And our starting this podcast was really an effort to increase conversation, increase education, and get people recognizing signs in their children that things are not right, and to go and get professional help, because for too many kids sometimes that comes too late.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for jumping in, in this space and jumping in and trying to just bring awareness, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I feel like this is something that you talk about the mental health, and obviously that's a hot topic around, these days, and a very serious situation that's going on in our times. But and I love the fact that you and your wife are able to kind of work together, and you kind of see, through her practice and things that she's dealing with, and seeing it from her perspective, and then bring it in from a layman's terms to really create some communication to us, the general public, of what's kind of going on. So, and you talk a lot about just being afraid of failure.
Right.
Kind of dive into some of that, if you will, with where we're at in that space there.
Right. Well, so I mean, failure is a part of learning, and it's a very important part. Obviously, you don't want to fail catastrophically, but I think parents sometimes, we talk about, helicopter parenting, and just being around your child all the time, sort of coddling them, and there is a role for kind of sometimes unfortunate fate to play in our development, and so I think kids need to explore on their own sometimes, with guidance, with guardrails. Obviously, that's what parents are for. But sometimes they need to learn by maybe not coming out on top of something, and by failing in some way. That's how you learn. That's how you improve as human beings. And so, I think that's a key theme that's come out of our exploration of this topic. And I think with the online community, we can all Google something and become armchair experts in 2 minutes or whatever. I think there's this sense that we can create this ideal path for our children to go down, and any deviation from it, is not right. It's not what we want. But sometimes you learn by deviating, and for me, it's been my life, certainly.
Absolutely. And I think you and I've talked about this before on a previous podcast, that we talk about, failure is part of life, right? I mean, we fall, right? We stumble every day.
Right.
But the thing is, and we learn from our failures. And I think that's what you're talking about here. I think, we as adults, sometimes we have to, these kids that are being kind of protected, they don't fail until later in life, and they don't know, at that point in time, it's harder to understand how to process it, because we've, like you said, we've protected them so much. And I'll be the first ones to tell you, and as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking about, my daughter, and, I have an older daughter, and I have one that's still in high school. And just over the time of just the different ways that we raised them, but we also, the younger one, I feel like we kind of have we put this bubble around her, making sure nothing happens. And in return, we think we're doing the right things, but sometimes we're just really holding them back from learning how to get up and dust off, right? And and I think that's the whole thing, and I talk about it all the time. That was that was the way I was raised, is to get up, dust off, and you'll be okay,
Right.
And at the time, I really thought that was pretty cruel. But when I look back now, from back in the 70s, when my parents were doing that, I realized, what they were really doing was just preparing the road ahead of me so that I could handle some of the adversity that lies ahead. So, and I really think that's what helped me through that. So, and I 100%, and I'd love to hear more advice that you can talk about that, because I'd love to hear more. Because I mean, I'm taking notes personally for myself here, because when you say, really putting this bubble, kind of helicopter parents, what are some of the things that you've seen and you've studied that are ways that we should handle this adversity in our kids?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a good question. Certainly, when you and I were growing up in the 70s and 80s, when we were coming of age, there was this. I certainly had loving parents, but we were kind of left to our own devices a lot of the times. It was, these days it would be seen as sort of feral parenting, right? Just letting your kids, explore for themselves, but they have to explore for themselves, I think. And I learned so many lessons, playing, football in the street or baseball in the street, and negotiating with other kids that I was friends with, and these were things that didn't have adult supervision, but we came up with some very very inventive and resourceful rules for what we were doing, and just I think so much of modern parenting involves supervised and structured play, and I understand certainly there are safety reasons for that, but this is something that the author Jonathan Haidt has talked a lot about in his book The Anxious Generation, which just goes into how kids are these days are their mental development and their psychosocial development is stunted and derailed really by technology and by this constant screen time that they're exposed to. And so, I think the key to raising resilient children certainly is getting these embodied experiences, right? Getting them in front of their peers, in front of other people, and learning how to negotiate a solution to situations that always arise in any kind of social interaction, right? And I think the notion now is to just retreat into your own world, your own digitized world, your fantasy land in essence. And for instance, boys are just they're not boys and girls, teenagers are not dating like they used to. They'd rather stay home and talk online or text or whatever. They're not going out and meeting people, having dates, having what we call embodied experiences. And there's a huge problem, that's we're creating by allowing these sort of cyber havens, right? These places where they can retreat to and they don't have to interact with other people. And long term, that's a really a bad thing for our society.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because we talk about screen time, and you hear, that's the big thing, right? I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, with my 15-year-old, we'll go somewhere and we're in the car,
right, with
3 other friends, and they're all 3 on their screens. They may be talking to each other, but they're on the screens. That social skill. Now, what are some of the things that, as parents with the teenage kids, what are some things that you've seen and you've I know you on the Nimble Youth, you've interviewed some really good. There's some great interviews on there about things like such that can help kids or test things that you've seen. What are some of those things that you've seen to maybe help us as parents get our kids breaking some of that screen time and getting them more interacting with each other?
Right. So I think, we've seen a decline in participation in sports, and certainly not every child is going to be into athletics, and that's fine. But I think a sports team having an actual embodied experience out in the weather, playing with other kids and working together. I think teamwork is a really important thing to do and to learn how to do, because I think right now our world is sort of geared towards being in our own corner, being in our own little niche, and not interacting with the world at large. So I think any kind of sports or team participation is a great thing to do. And that could be something like, I don't know, my son did, Boy Scouts. He didn't do, organized sports in high school, but, so, something like that where you're interacting with other peers. And if it's not athletics, something like, certainly like, a youth group at church, or, a choir. I sing in a choir as, in my 50s now, and that's just a great way to, express yourself through art, through music, but you're working together with other people, and you're not looking at a screen. You're looking at notes on a page, and you're working together to a common goal, and you have to blend with the people around you, right? You have to find your role in this great concert, and that's what life is. It's about learning how to work together, and as a society, we succeed when we work together. And I think just too much now we're retreating into ourselves, and the social cohesion is really breaking down because of that. So my advice to parents would be, unabashedly, just get your kids out there doing things that don't involve screens.
Yes, yeah, and I agree. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the trying, and I'm kind of sitting here as just more of a listener than anything, because my daughter's involved with sports and all that, but I'm so thankful for that, because if you really think about it, while we're in that activity, is probably one of the few times she's not on a screen.
Right.
Right. And even sometimes it's in the car on the way there, and then on the way. And so that moment, those couple of hours and things that she's involved with, that is really a good time. Now, I do know there's, nowadays there's a lot of people putting some places of screen time usage, kind of making sure they're setting some boundaries in that. Do you have any suggestions on that type of thing, how to kind of manage some of this for parents?
Yeah, it's always a tough one, because you can put up gates, and they're always going to be breached in some way. I think it comes to a place where we try to get kids involved in situations where they can't use their phone. Like for instance, and my kids were just before they were growing up, just before the smartphones hit in a big way. So we kind of got through it, relatively unscathed. Although my daughter's about to graduate college, so certainly their college years have been involved. They've had the smartphone usage, but putting away the phones at dinner, and to the extent that you can, making sure that the phones are off and not being used during the night. It's that constant sort of exposure to stimulation it's injurious in so many ways to their developing brains. And so I think technology is going to be here. It's not going to go away. We're not going to go back to communicating via telegraph or whatever. And technology is great. I mean, there are some very, very wonderful things that technology has enabled. And so we just have to have and I don't think it's an evil force. I don't think it's per se evil. It's just, it is a phenomenon, and how we react to it, as individuals and as parents of children who are trying to navigate, a very complex world, is key. And just coming to some sort of consensus on proper limits of screen time. And obviously there are, for classwork, a lot of times they have to turn in things online, or if school has been canceled, like around here in North Carolina, we had a pretty bad winter, and we had a lot of snow days this year, and an unusual number. And so a lot of times schools would instead of closing the school, they would have this sort of optional online day. And of course, during COVID, that was how kids got through school. And so, I think, there are obviously some good uses for technology, and some ways in which we can't really avoid it. And, it's better to have maybe an online classroom than no classroom at all. Right. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So there are some positive uses for it, but just limiting, its impact on their life, and coming to just an understanding of why. And I think it's okay to tell children, look, if tell them why you want them to limit their screen time, because it's gonna damage your brain. You're not going to be able to function in society. I mean, it's just lay it out there for them, and that's not a lie. That's the truth.
Well, and it's again, the technology is a wonderful thing. I mean, and in fact, I was just having this conversation the other day. And we have, there's some things that are some amazing tools, and we can use them in the right way, and we can use them in the wrong way.
Right.
Like you said, there's nothing against the technology. In fact, it's really enhanced all of our worlds in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But the analogy that was used that day when we were talking to him, he said, we could take a pencil and write a beautiful novel, or someone can take a pencil and shove it in their eye. It can be used in a good way and in a bad way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing with technology. It's how do we use it, how we manage it.
Right.
And I'm here in Texas, and one of the high school that my daughter goes to this year stopped all cell phones in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, when that came out, the news came out, you thought the world was ending, right? I mean, it was
right.
The kids thought this was going to be the end of all, right? And I will tell you, I've noticed a difference just in my daughter, but talking to the principal, who's a friend of mine, and he says, "Ty, it's amazing listening to the conversations now that they're having, walking up and down the halls between classes, whereas before they had their heads down on their phones." And so I mean, anyway, all that technology, and we're going to kind of get back to resilience, though, because that technology is, again, we've kind of it's a tool that we've had that really keeps us from getting out and creating tools that help us, from learning how to deal with resilience. And I, you don't think about those things, but like you said, the little negotiations, in the game that we're playing out in the streets, just talking about the rules and how we're gonna build this sport, or whatever that was back in the youth. Those were all things that we were communicating and trying to figure out together.
Right.
That I still think helps build resilience, because hey, this game, it didn't work that way, so let's try this way. Didn't. So it was kind of what you keep talking. You've talked about is we can't be afraid of failure, and and as a parent, we can't be afraid to let our children fail.
Exactly.
Because it sounds crazy, but failure is really building success. And
exactly.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, without failure, we can't be successful.
That's absolutely right. And, I hope that, colleges and universities understand this too. And I think to a certain degree, some of them do, certainly. But, I think there's a lot of, paranoia with parents and students, these very high achieving students, about, just appearing perfect on paper, doing all the right activities, being in all the right groups, because the admission process for some of these elite schools, and certainly even state schools that now are very, very hard to get into in certain cases. I hope that the admissions counselors understand that failure is part of being ready to succeed in college, right? I mean, I don't think doing all the right things and not having had a misstep along the way is really, really a good thing. And we just had an episode that we taped with Nimble Youth about how a lot of times these very bright, these very intelligent and accomplished students can get to college, and they were standouts in their high school, right? They got the straight A's. They were on the varsity teams and did all the right extracurricular activities. But then they get to college, and you're a small fish in a very big pond, or you're a minnow in the ocean, really.
Right.
Whereas you might have been a big fish in a small pond at your high school. And certainly that happened to me. It happens to a lot of people. It takes some adjustment, but it's a big concern for a lot of these for a lot of parents. Sometimes it's and we address this in the episode, which is coming out probably 2 or 3 weeks from now. We address the fact that it could be something like undiagnosed ADHD. Because when you're in college, when you're out on your own as an adult, it requires executive functioning, right? And that's what is expressly impaired with ADHD. And as someone who has it myself, I completely understand what that breakdown in executive functioning can be. So medication can really help. And these days, there are great medicines out there. So sometimes it's just a matter of getting that diagnosis and then finding one that works for them. I think there's been a pushback sometimes on overprescribing drugs for ADHD, or sort of overdiagnosing students with them. And it's a concern. I certainly understand that, but I think our approach, Gretchen, my approach on Nimble Youth certainly has been, it's if you're spending tens of thousands of dollars a year to send your kid to college, let's make sure that they have the tools to succeed and not just fall apart, and then that experience is wasted. And again, it's not to say that they shouldn't fail, or they can't have a bad grade here or there, because that is very instructive. But for them to sort of completely break down, which happens to a lot of students. I certainly remember I had a couple of friends who got scholarships to elite universities, and they got in there. They got full ride scholarships. They got in there and just completely fell apart. Whether it was they fell into drinking, partying, or they just couldn't deal with this new situation that required so much more of them. They were masters in their own domain earlier, probably with their parents' help,
Sure.
but they got into college and they just couldn't deal with it. So I think failure is part of life, and we have to expect it. But by the same token, if you have a condition that causes you to not perform at your potential, it's time to seek some professional help. It could be medication that helps. It could be some therapy that helps. And it could be some combination of the two. So, we're in an exciting time now as far as medical advances are concerned, and therapeutic advances as well. We're just finding out what really works to address a lot of these mental health conditions. I think the key is to navigate it, carefully.
You brought up a point, and you talked about, being in part of a choir or an athletic activity earlier, about communicating and kind of being part of, but also, I was sitting there thinking about the failure in that, right? I mean, that teaches you. I mean, I was just kind of going into my own youth, and I thought, man, I played baseball, but I mean, we failed all the time, right? I mean, I'd strike out, sometimes I was, at the plate 3 times, and I struck out 3 times,
Right.
that game. But the next game I came back and tried, so it teaches choir, singing with a group. You may not be, this part of this particular song or this, whatever it may be. There's certain things that you learn to adjust and fail and pick back up and succeed. And, so not only the communication in the youth, I think those type things also teach us failure. So, and how to overcome failure, because,
Right.
in fact, I was reading a book, talking about, failing forward type deal. It talks about, failing is not a bad thing. And
No.
it's steps of life that we absolutely have to deal with
Right.
to be successful. So,
Right.
well, I'm so excited that you're talking in this space with the youth, because I know in our audience there's parents that are probably sitting in the same place I am, going, man, absolutely, I need to think about this, or I need to think. I mean, like I said, I wrote down a couple things in myself here that I want to try to implement and within our own house, and I hope people that are listening are doing the same. Now, I want to kind of go into, you have a podcast and I've listened to several of them, and in fact, there's a lot of good information. I have to give you credit, Matt. That's been some really good stuff with you and your wife, and the studies and the people that you've had on have been very interesting. So I encourage people, if this is an interest to you, please follow Matt on the Nimble Youth, because there is some great information in some of his past episodes, and I'm sure some coming up, that will help in this space, because I do believe this is a space that we're all, as parents, we're all looking how we can be a better parent. So if you don't mind, real quick, just tell us a little bit about Nimble Youth and how they can find you, and maybe anything going on there.
Sure. So you can find us at our website, which is www.nimbleyouthpodcast.com. And then we're the podcast, the audio versions are on all major podcast platforms. So just do a search for Nimble Youth. I think we're the only game out there with that name. And, we also have a YouTube channel, and we're trying to increase our presence in there and other places like Instagram and TikTok. So we're trying to master the technological domain here. But please seek us out. Our role is to increase education and to increase conversation, because listen, mental illness, it festers in isolation, and it can be very destructive in isolation, and it can kill people, in isolation. Absolutely. And so the important thing is to talk about what's going on with your child. And as parents, parenting is the hardest job in the world. And I'm sure, Ty, I'm sure you would agree with me there. It's the most important job, but it's also the hardest job. And so I think, coming to a forum where you can get information on what may be going on with your child's mental health or their behaviors, and how you can, as parents, help enable them, to deal with these things. And because, again, just addressing it, talking with your children, communication is everything. And that's the role. That's the goal of Nimble Youth, is to increase communication.
Absolutely. Well, and that's, great information. And like I said, I'd love to sit here and visit about this stuff for a long time. I know we're short on time, but I want, in closing, Matt, is there anything you would just leave the audience, and just kind of, in closing, just to kind of, as far as any advice or anything other? I know you've given some great information, so you may not have any left, but is there anything that you would, words of wisdom, I guess, in this space at all?
Yeah. So, I think we were talking about technology earlier, and it's very unusual because, technology has increased connection. We're talking to each other over hundreds of miles between us, so it's a great thing. 30 years ago, we've had to write each other letters, and we couldn't do this so easily. I would have had to fly down to you there in Texas. So technology is great, and it increases connection, which is wonderful, but it can also foster isolation. So I think the key is to stop, to arrest that sort of isolation. Just connect with your child any way you can, regularly throughout the day. Meal times are great. I know it's hard sometimes with modern life to find, ways to sit down together, but having these sort of ritualistic, regular places and times where we connect. I have 2 children who live far from me, and I have a brother who's down in Louisiana. So we're all over the country, but we try to we actually we'll play games, online sometimes. We try to do every couple of weeks, certainly. And so connection that way. If it is electronic, that's fine. But just fostering connection is the key.
Absolutely. I love that. I love encouraging connection. And and just a second, what you just mentioned, it's interesting because the drive to school every morning for us, my wife takes her most of the time, but I get the pleasure of doing it sometimes. And those are our best conversations.
Absolutely.
That 10 or 15 minutes that we get.
Yep.
And I've always looked forward to that, and I know my wife does too. So
yeah.
But those are that time that we've found, and so Matt, I can't thank you enough for what you guys are doing, and please echo the appreciation to your wife for what she's doing in this space, because guys, this is a very serious space that I think needs to continue to be talked about. And learn from people like Matt and his wife on things we can do, things that, part of it is just being aware of what's going on with our children and maybe recognize and sometimes when we think we need to discipline, it's not the time. Maybe it's, but learning when and how based off of what our children are going through is what I think is critical. So Matt, I just want to thank you so much. And guys, please go out and visit the Nimble Youth. Go follow him. I think, again, when you talking about take 15, 20 minutes and just listen to some of Matt's episodes. And I promise you'll come away with some good information. So, Matt, thank you again for your time. And
thank you, Ty.
You bet. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to No Options. If this episode spoke to you, please take a moment and leave a review. And more importantly, please share it with someone who may need to hear it. You can find more stories, resources, and ways to connect over at my website, tygipson.com. And that is Gipson with a P, TYGIPSON.com. Remember, no matter where you are, your story isn't over yet if you live like you have no options. I'll see you next time.
Ty Gipson is an entrepreneur, a relentless survivor. Did you know he's also a powerhouse speaker? After overcoming 3 transplants and juvenile diabetes, he built thriving businesses with one mantra: no options. Ty transforms adversity into action. His keynotes ignite audiences with real-world resilience and 30-plus years of sales mastery. Are you ready to inspire your team? Book Ty Gipson today as your next speaker. You can call 512-944-4780 or head over to tygipson.com. That's Gipson with a P. It's time for your event to share the motivation that is no options.